Hi everyone, this is the next episode of the Zezcast, that's me, and I'm flying solo on this one, and today I'm talking to a creator, that's what we call them these days, creators, that's, of someone that I've followed and admired for a long time. This is Vinnk from Famicom Dojo, and to me, Famicom Dojo is one of the OG retro gaming sites, really educated me about, there's a Japanese version of the NES, really took me through all of that. Vinnk lives in Japan with his family for quite some time now. In the last few years has started Japan Retro Direct, I would say a boutique games. You can buy games, sort of very small, not big, very, thoughtful collection, handpicked, let's say. I like
curated.
Curated, that's the word I'm looking for. Oh, English, me forget.
That's okay.
And also I wanted to talk to Vinnk about just what's the feeling on the ground in Japan. None of us have been able to visit for the last 2 years. How has the pandemic changed retro gaming? So Vinnk, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks. That's quite an introduction. We were doing Famicom Dojo since YouTube was, I don't even know. Like long before it was bought by Google, when it was just when it was a thing that limited your video length to 10 minutes. That's why the early episodes are so short, because you couldn't put anything else up. And it's been a wild ride. It's amazing how many people that I watch and respect have mentioned that they used to watch Famicom Dojo back in the day, and I'm like, why aren't we big? But
what year did you start that? What was that?
Oh my goodness, that would have been like 2004, 2005. No, couldn't have been that early. Oh no, I feel terrible.
The current site listed a 2006 or something.
Yeah,
like
that's
this.
Probably it. My
something
goodness.
I don't know if that was the exact.
I should know this. Okay.
So back then in 2006, you were still living in the States, or when you started Famicom Dojo, or I guess give us the quick, because I know you've been living there with your family. Did you live there before, and then there was a bit? What's the sort of quick summary of where you've lived over the years?
Oh goodness. I grew up living in Wisconsin. And that's where I met Sean Orange or whatever. We went to college together. But Famicom Dojo started after I moved to Japan. So the entire history of this enterprise, I suppose, has been long distance, with us recording. We occasionally can record a video together, and those ones are super fun. But mostly we just talk on the phone, script these things out. Some of them are scripted, but figure out how we're going to do this, and we record our little bits. Some of the really elaborate ones involved when I was taking a trip back to the States, recording bits of like the flight and everything, so it looked like I was actually going over there. It's a dumb little show, but it's back when you could be dumb on YouTube. I mean, you can still be dumb on YouTube, but like there was there was a thoughtfulness to the dumb. Like you couldn't just take your cell phone out back then and record things. You actually had to have we called them camcorders. They're like smartphones, but they can't make a call. But it was something that, and now anybody with a phone can make a video of anything, and specifically those, have. When YouTube started, we thought this would be an amazing way for like all this information to get out there, all this data, to finally allow people. I've been making videos since before Famicom Dojo. We used to put them up on Real Video and just direct download of the AVI file or things like that. My background is when I was a college student, I worked at a local television station, so I learned editing and things like that there on an Amiga of all things. My first year.
Oh dang!
Yeah, I used video.
I had Amiga 500 when I was growing up.
I used Video Toaster. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
So when you were first doing it, when you first made those, let's say the first Famicom Dojo was computers like, was it enough that you could edit on your own laptop at that stage?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
your own PC?
Yeah, Sean, a lot of it, Sean did the editing back then. But yeah, he was doing it from, I think, his desktop computer. But yeah, the hardest thing was getting the files to the other thing. There wasn't anything really huge like Dropbox then, so sometimes we had to split the files into tons of little zip files and send them. I do believe I actually just mailed an SD card to him, or a CD or something. Like, this was, maybe we sent.
Sure, that's the old station wagon full of VHS old tapes. Is the
maybe
the example in computer science.
Maybe sent them over like AOL Instant Messenger. I don't even remember anymore. It's a lifetime ago, and that's really cool though that YouTube has grown this much, because
Yeah, I like it because, I mean, I imagine I wasn't watching YouTube. I'm a bit late to YouTube, but I wasn't watching it then. But there wasn't, I mean, as much on the Japanese side in English back then. Was that kind of your inspiration?
Oh, definitely. We approached this as a way of being archivists. Like, I was worried at the time that, like, some of this knowledge would be lost. Now, I never anticipated that YouTube would explode how it is, and now, sorry about that. And now every single facet of Japan retro gaming has been covered a million times. So it's harder for us to find something brand new, but like some of the things we covered, I do believe we had like the first videos on, or the first like ones that went in depth, like the Super Famicom modem video we did. Like, I did that video because I couldn't find anything in English about it, and I figured other people might have wanted to know what this crazy thing is. And now I'm sure there's a million better videos, but like at the time we thought we were creating something for people to know about this other side of gaming. And it's before a lot of people were collecting, and now again, everyone's got their walls of games behind them, which is my usual look, but at the time it was kind of rare, and I had the good fortune to find someone who in Famicom Dojo is named after a shop called Famicom Dojo.
That's where I was going to go next with that. Tell us about the real Famicom Dojo.
The real Famicom Dojo.
The real, sorry. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it still exists. It's run by a like 90-something-year-old woman now, and her son, who has a day job but is still pops in every now and then. And he told me all about like the days, when they switched from being a toy store that sold primarily model trains to this newfangled Famicom when it came out. They renamed to Famicom Dojo, but at the beginning days they had a hard time actually getting Famicoms because they were sold out. See, Nintendo kind of goes in this straight this circle, but so for a while they had to sell like the Super Cassette Vision, which was a kind of it was not up to the specs of the Famicom. It was a little bit higher than like the Atari 2600. Maybe you'd put it on like a ColecoVision, Intellivision kind of level.
Okay.
Yeah. So they were selling that, and then when they finally got Famicom stuff, they sold it. And wow. They have never told me the story completely, but I think they were also like, they were pirating disk system games.
Okay.
Because
that was a thing.
It was. And so like I you see, if you look at an old disk system game, you pull out the manual, it has a listing of all the places where disk writers could be found. There's because so
these kiosks you mean that
exactly
were available,
these kiosks where you could write disks, and I knew they sold disk system games back in that day, and I'm like, why isn't your name listed? And I got this very vague answer like, well, Nintendo wouldn't have listed us. And I'm like, oh, were you I again, I don't want to throw accusations around, but anyway,
it's great that has existed since then, and somehow like this, I guess it's a dying breed. This kind of store can just sort of still exist. And
that's the only one I know of in this area. When I came here, I came to the city I live in right now in 2004. Within easy driving distance, there were 4 or 5 mom and pop stores I knew, and this is the last man standing. The only thing left is the chains. And chains can be great. We mentioned Hard Off is one that you mentioned to me that you used to go to, and they're fun. But like the chains have woken up to the reality of what things are worth, and that's kind of ruined it.
Yeah, sure. That's now because Famicom Dojo, we don't get too specific, but it's
Sure.
it's right in the south. So you're in the right in the south.
Yeah, we're in Kyushu. We're in Kyushu.
Japan.
Yeah.
In Kyushu, okay. Because I'd love to come, but it's always sort of I sort of get as far as Osaka and they go like, oh, okay, that seems like a real far way past.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you ever come, I'll show you around. We got the closest big city to me, like really big city, is Fukuoka, and that's a fair sized city, and there's some good game shopping there. It's not Tokyo or Osaka, but since it's not Tokyo or Osaka, the prices haven't gone up as much as those places. My goodness, I went to.
I would say there was a correlation between how hard it is to get to the hard off store.
That's right.
Is how good of deals or how good stuff you're going to find there.
Oh, exactly. I mean, Akihabara, when I came for my first time, maybe 2004, 2005. No, earlier. I don't even remember. But because I was a student before I lived here for a little while, and then I would visit a couple times. And before I went, I'll save money on airfare if I just live here. So the first couple times I went, though, it's just the deals were just incredible. Even in Tokyo, because it was mainly a place where gaming enthusiasts came and they bought their stuff and they resold their stuff, and there wasn't as much of an idea of amassing a giant collection. In those days you beat an RPG and you sold it, and then you picked up a different game and things like that. You maybe only held on to the ones that you were going to play again and again. That's why I think that's why some games, especially focused on multiplayer, like Bomberman titles, have really kind of retained their value still, because people just held on to those. And why a game like Chrono Trigger, which is intensely expensive anywhere outside of Japan, can be bought for like $5 here.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's because...
Why is that? Do you... So we've got, even today, let's say the market's become saturated and, there's a lot of... we do that, but still Japan is a great place. Still, you can walk into hard offs all over the country and it's full of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why is that specific to Japan? I mean, is it just the easy answer that that's where this stuff comes from, so it stays there? Or is there something else? I mean, a lot of NES and a lot of was sold in America as well. Like, why? What culturally has led to these amazing stores, these great secondhand scene in Japan, do you think?
Again, it's not what it used to be, but like if we take it back to where it was, there's so many different reasons of it. For one, there's this idea of, here, I'm gonna put something out there that I have no research whatsoever for, but
go for it.
But for a lot of Japanese people, they live in little apartments. They live in, and there's not a huge amount of space, and the best deals you can get on import games in Japan is in January. Now, why would that be? Okay. Because January is when traditionally Japanese people clean their houses.
Sure.
How a lot of countries have spring cleaning. They clean up for the New Year's holiday, and then everything's closed during the New Year's. But then afterwards, they often bring their things to like Book Off or one of these used game stores, because there's the idea of out with the old, in with the new, and that's when I pounce. That's when that's when all the stuff's there. And again, it's not as much as it used to be, because I think Japan was really slow to get on board the collector market, if that makes any sense. It does a lot, yep. Because you had people who were into games. I had friends who were, I guess you could say, otaku, although it's it's almost a slur here in Japan, but like I know a lot of people still wear it as a badge of honor, but even though they were totally into games, they had very small collections of games. You know, it was it and the idea of just amassing the wall of games. I think a lot of that came about with the advent of YouTube and eBay and like these ways of, you know,
online.
Well, it's the internet. It's the internet. Yeah,
it's generating FOMO and then giving us a
Exactly.
way to service that FOMO.
Exactly.
And then it just builds and grows from there.
yeah. And oh man, FOMO is my demon. You know, I struggle with it because I sold before I got married. I sold off nearly all of my collection. I kept a few games that I really, you know, that I really loved, that I really thought, because I thought it's time to become an adult. Like that was.
So you mean specifically before the wedding, like you were like, okay, we're preparing for the new life and we're gonna move in and all this, so I'll liquidate most of the collection.
Planning to start a family, you know, and I'm like, you know, I still like video games and I'll still play video games, but you know, I don't need to have all of this stuff. And that was, I got married 14 years ago today, actually. So
congratulations on that. That
you
was
very
quite
much.
a coincidence. I didn't know we were booking this. So
It's
congratulations
okay.
on
It's
that.
okay. Thank you. And so I got rid of all kinds of stuff. I had, oh my goodness, I had a very respectable Neo Geo AES collection. I had a lot of PC Engine stuff. I had but at the time it was not unforeseen. You know, the prices were still reasonable, so I still lied to myself that I'd be able to, you know, put the collection back together if I ever regretted the choice. Let's be generous and say 2 years later, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake, and that it was possible to love my wife and love my family and also to be an adult who has a secret game room.
Sure.
So we built a house about, gosh, what would it be now? About 8 years ago. By we, of course, I mean the builders built it, but like
I understood that.
It's I just don't want to oversell myself, but when that happened, we put in a game room with a lock on the door, so no one has to know how incredibly
and that's the room that we see on your videos when you're
a
streaming.
lot of the
we'll
time.
see behind you.
That's
Okay.
Now it looks possibly bigger than it is, because for a lot of people, their game room, they put the wall of games behind them, but there's this big rest of the room. But mine is just a smallish closet, really. I mean,
It seems like a closet.
It is quite. Yeah, there's. I could probably touch both walls if I extend. But the thing is, the reason it's so small is because there's deep shelves going all the way around it.
Okay. So you designed it when you built it. You said, okay, you gave
That's
some
right.
thought to how we're going to put the shelves in around it.
That's right. And I was very, very clever because I didn't want them to know how big of a nerd I was. I said I collect records. And I thought that would be a good size because like collector's edition boxes can sometimes be as big as an LP. And because I also collect laser discs, which is another rabbit hole we're not going to go down today. But but I ran out of space a few years later, and like the collection is now also upstairs, and some of it's at my mother-in-law's house, and it's the store is a survival mechanism. Like the store was not intended to really be a store. It's just it gives me legitimacy for buying so many games. Like it's an alibi, really. I mean, you know.
I can imagine it's a bit of a like. It's also the thrill of the hunt is part of it.
Exactly.
As well, you get to have the thrill of the hunt and then actually have an outlet for it.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I'm constantly like upgrading my own collection. Like I have what I consider the permanent collection, which is the games that I play that I love, and a great deal of them have some kind of a childhood memory connected with them. Or one that I've discovered since being in Japan and just fell in love with. But So I have that, and pretty much everything else is for sale. Again, FOMO is terrible.
It's hard to let go.
I have, like, this is why I'm such a terrible store owner. It's like a drug dealer who's also a user. You know what I mean? It's like it's a big problem because I'll find something and I'll be like, oh, this would be great for the store, or I could just keep it. And I found myself going like, oh, do I really want to list this game on the store right now? I only have 3 copies. And it's like, I mean, I hear myself say it, but I'm like, what if 2 copies break? You know, like, it's
yeah, I understand that. For me, I live in Europe, in Tallinn, in Estonia.
Oh, okay.
We have a pretty small apartment here as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So the way that I've solved that problem for myself is I rent a storage room.
Ah.
And at this stage, well, I've still got some because my girlfriend and I moved in together, so some of my furniture is still in there.
Yeah.
So there's a barbecue and big stuff as well, but there's boxes and boxes. And at this stage, I've got it's not all games, definitely. I don't make it out. I've got them laid out, but I've got 2 shipping containers right now that I rent.
Oh my goodness.
As well, and that's not all games, but there's monitors. I've got I like to collect CRTs as well, so I've been stashing those as well because right now in my area we're in the tail end of the CRT golden age. You can still get a reasonable deal. You can still get them for $20 when they come up. Maybe a couple times a month. A Trinitron, a consumer Trinitron will come up for about $20. So if you've got the manpower to store it. So I've got a few of those. I've been keeping them in there. I understand this is not necessarily maintainable in the future. Also ask myself questions.
I know.
Where does this go? What do I do? How am I mean, if monitors keep going into the storage room, when do they come out? I can't answer that question.
I had to get rid of a CRT last year or whatever because it was giant. It was one of the later ones, so it was letterbox shaped, very flat. The tube was very flat. It was really nice, but I couldn't justify keeping it at the time because there was just absolutely no room for it. It was just a beast. It was very heavy, very, very large, and we already had the flat screen, and I have a smaller CRT in my gaming room, and I was like, I want to keep this, and my wife asked me, and I'm like, well, CRTs, you see scan lines, and like it was a losing battle. It was a losing battle, but I regret it because it's getting harder and harder to find those things. And
it's hard to know. I mean, Mike mentioned I had a 20-inch that was sitting in our lounge room, and finally we've had some negotiations with my girlfriend. Okay, it's got to get out. We gotta. So that one's going to the storage room. I've got a 14-inch that I'll keep here in this little den that I've got. Actually, that's interesting. Tell us about the state of CRTs in Japan. Are they available? Can you find them easily or not? I mean, not even talking about pro monitors and BVMs and PVMs and that sort of stuff. What's your take on CRTs in Japan?
Well, I mean, I got to say, recently they're getting harder and harder to find. There used to be a dime a dozen. If you went to now, you're familiar with Hardoff for the software.
Sure.
It's a chain of stores actually that has a number of them. There's also Book Off, which is a used bookstore, and Hobby Off, which sells like Gundam models and toys and things like that. And there's also Off House, and Off House sells furniture and appliances. And you used to walk in there and you could get CRTs for 1,000 yen, which is like $10 US. But the thing is, since nobody really wants them anymore in Japan, these stores have stopped taking them. So like once they sold through their initial stock, now you can get a CRT find if you go like, if you know someone who works in an electronics store, because in Japan you can't just throw one of these things away. You actually have to pay to recycle it. And so if you announce that you will take someone's old CRT, they will give it to you. In fact, they may even pay you to take it. Right, because it's going to cost them like $30, 3,000 yen. Sorry, I'm using American dollars.
That's all right. Go. It's all US, euros, dollars.
Okay.
It's all kind of samey for the rough way we do it here.
But because it's going to cost them $30, so they might give you $10 to get rid of it for them. So. Right. But the problem is less and less people have those sitting around anymore. People have, since the digital signal stopped. Since the signal that a CRT can pick up has stopped. It's of little use to anyone outside of gamers, really. And gamers, for the most part, have the CRTs they're gonna be using. And what's sad is a lot of them are just being stripped for parts. So there's precious metals in them, and they're being shipped off in storage containers to China, where they're being taken apart and the bits being sold off. So right now, if you live in Japan and you know a guy, you can get CRTs not too bad.
Like maybe classifieds. I mean, that's how I get them here. Not like online people selling person to person. That's how I'm getting them in Estonia.
Not as much. I mean, I suppose if you use like Yahoo auctions or whatever, but for the most part, the shipping is so expensive to send over something like that that a lot of them.
It's very localized. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So in such a sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah,
I'm
go
sort of
ahead.
interested in the dynamics
Sure.
of way that works. So because again, I kind of forget in some moments because Estonia is a country.
Yeah.
With 1.3 million people.
Yeah.
That's a country.
Yeah.
It's nuts how small that can be. So we're very small, very connected. I can we got one or two classifieds websites and that's it. But okay, Japan, huge country, everyone's packed in. There's not sort of these local or regional. Is it really just the Yahoo auctions, or are there smaller ones? Or
there's a few different things. Probably the one that would be for like just regular people selling stuff they don't need anymore is Mercari, which I believe has gone international now, but it started in Japan, and it's based. And there's still flea markets and things like that. But again, no one's hefting a CRT to those things. Like they might have used to when it had some value, but no one's going to be able to sell it for very much. So a lot of people just don't bother with it.
And you're not seeing that demand from gamers. If you follow anything on YouTube, it's just not in America. It's just like nonstop. They're getting crazy.
Oh yeah.
And I know Australia is a little bit in Estonia. As I said, we can still pick them up here. It's starting to get there, but you're not seeing that demand from retro gamers in Japan for them.
Not as much. But again, like I think that like the really, really hardcore people who are really into it, they're obviously looking for that kind of tech,
They're finding them, sure.
And they're finding them, or they're using Framemeisters or things like that, and they're avoiding the CRT, but still kind of getting that retro experience for the most part. But one of the things is most gamers in Japan do not care at all, because and that's something that one of my pet peeves, and you don't see this anymore because everything's HD now, but Japan got letterbox TVs long before the rest of the world. You
mean 16:9?
16:9. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Look at me.
But anyway, I still call CRTs box TVs.
There you go. You go. Perfect.
It's fine.
But they would have these, but they'd be watching a standard, 4x3 signal with it stretched out. And you'd go to the post office where they've got a TV set up while people are waiting and things like that, or a waiting room, and it just bothered me. I'm like, how can you not see how terrible that is? And they just didn't care, And so a lot of even gaming stores where they had the kiosks. When the Wii came out, they had upgraded, of course. For the because it was also around the time of the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. So they had their TV things upgraded. But when they put the Wii's connected to them, they often or like GameCube or something like that, they often still had it all stretched out. And I'm like, adjust your options. You how can this be okay to you? How can this, I don't know. But
it's interesting because
yeah.
okay, so if you, I mean, any look
Yeah.
over retro gaming YouTube would tell
yeah.
there is plenty of OCD
Oh,
where we're a
yeah,
little bit on the
yeah,
spectrum
yeah,
or
yeah.
something, and
Oh,
we've got to have
definitely.
the CRT aligned correctly.
Oh, of
I do
course.
this podcast with my friend Steve, and
Yeah.
he's like one of the most well-known CRT repair guys on YouTube.
Wow.
Spends his whole time, he can pull apart PVMs,
Yeah.
BVMs, and that's his whole job is fixing them. And you endless amounts of posts where someone
definitely.
posts a picture of the 240p test suite with the grid lines, and they're fine, but they're like, oh my god, it's off by I can't cope with it. So I don't know if I'm going a stretch too far here to go that there's some weird, I don't know, OCD,
there's
some
gotta be.
weird perfectionism in Western culture.
Oh, yeah.
But you're saying you don't see it as much in Japanese culture. I would broadly say that from what you've just said. Is that?
I mean, there's definitely a fringe. Have you ever played? There's a very famous visual novel called Steins Gate. Have you ever played this? Or heard of it? One of the characters in this game is a CRT enthusiast.
Okay, all right.
And this game is supposed to take place in modern day, and the other characters are always asking this person why they care about these old. So like, it's a known thing in Japan that there are definitely those people on. I almost used the word the spectrum, but I wouldn't be totally wrong. You know, I mean, there's definitely
we're saying respectfully when we say
exactly,
it. Okay.
exactly. But there's definitely people who are on that spectrum of geekiness. You know what I mean? Where that definitely matters. And again, when you go to some place like Akihabara, you're gonna find those people, and you're gonna find those shops. You're gonna find people who collect arcade boards, which are incredibly expensive and difficult to use, and they're gonna hook those up to the best CRTs possible. You know, they are going to care so very much. And then there's the local arcade in my town, which has the CRTs with huge burn-in. And you know, they you know, it's Tetris now. They've switched it over to Tetris, but you can still see the baseball player from the game that was on there before, and it, you know, but it's kind of like that's good enough, because gaming for like the enthusiast and gaming for mainstream are so incredibly different. Like, not just for retro, but Switch is plowing the competition. There's no competition at all right now. It's Nintendo Switch, which is inarguably the lowest, you know, the maybe not lowest tech, because there's some pretty advanced chips in there, but like from a visual perspective, you don't have 4K, you don't have anything like that, but it sells because it's good enough. And I think for a lot of the things there is that idea of good enough. Or alternate philosophy, there's a lot of this that exists that I am unaware of. That's very possible too, because you know, a lot of the gamers I know here are not so much into retro in the way that I am, and you know, they're fine to hook up their like Super Famicom to a 4K TV and it's fine.
Just plug it straight in with a composite cable and go for it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Which to us is just butchery. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I haven't done it myself, but you know, but now, you know, I've got my scan line generator that's works. You know, it's, you know, and then a lot of games are trying to put that in itself. I don't know. I mean, I know the purpose of this is not to just go on about CRTs, but something has been lost, you know.
By the way, totally fine.
Yeah.
The whole other podcast that Steve and I have a whole podcast called the Cathode Ray Podcast.
Okay, good.
Every week we talk for an hour and a half about CRT, so you are good company.
Perfect. I'm not getting off topic. I'm getting on topic.
No.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Love it.
But I mean, you've seen all the posts or whatever where they show the original CRT image and like the smoothed out. I know someone who's super into like square pixels.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
super sharp, like on a flat screen.
Super sharp. I think it looks so ugly. I just can't, because you want the sharpest CRT possible, but in a way that's still the way that the games would have been designed, still fuzzy enough. I'm telling you these things, but like, I'm sure this is probably all the episodes you've talked about before, but yeah, there's something about that, and I think, I don't know, it's kind of sad that people aren't more into it, but at the same time, maybe it's healthier because it doesn't bring the prices to unreasonable levels. You know what I mean? Like, people have their favorite games. It's definitely
a thing in the States. Those, especially the professional level monitors, they're just bananas.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm glad I've got a BVM myself, a 20-inch BVM, which is my pride and joy, and will probably be my retirement fund one day. But as you say, one of the weird things and the difficulties with CRTs is, okay, fine, I've got a 20-inch BVM. Yeah. If that thing was in America where I could get it with Steve and we could ship it with some sort of reasonable shipping, maybe, I don't know, 2,000-3,000, who knows, right? Yeah. The problem is that monitor is sitting in Tallinn, Estonia, and there's not that many people that I can actually ship that as. And if you want to say something is only worth what someone will pay, well, something's only worth what someone will pay to get it to them as well. That's a factor in the transaction.
Yeah.
And as you sort of alluded before, that the CRTs were being shipped off to places like China to get disassembled. I know there is, I'm not even sure that you can import a CRT to America anymore. Like, I think you can't import them into the EU. They're definitely strict because of the chemicals that are in them.
I would say so, yeah.
And stuff like that. I know Steve and I have discussed, he knows a few people in different places around the world who talk to him, and they're like, look, we're in somewhere in this Asian country and we've got a garage full of these old things, and it sounds great, and you want to get the logistic guys on it, but then there's importing of these things, like how you declare it and the chemical, it couldn't happen. So they're a funny thing to price because of that. They're really about where is the item. It might actually be where it ends its days.
It's crazy. Yeah, and the shipping restrictions have gotten so much stricter. Technically, I can't ship something like a 3DS right now because of the batteries. You
can take the battery out and then
you can, but like, nobody wants that. I mean, well, I'm sure there's some people who want that. But like you have to be. Things have gotten a lot more difficult, and gosh, I used to send people back in the day when you could get cheaper shipping. I used to send people Laserdisc players because there was a time when they were so cheap in Japan for the models that were selling for 3-4 times that price in the United States. Now, I wouldn't do it these days because the only shipping that's affordable for sending something like that is also really crummy shipping, where you would definitely get the laser out of alignment or something like that. So,
are there any? I want to move on. I will move on to your store soon, but I guess with the shipping thing though, are there any are there still some, I don't know, like sea shipping that like will be okay? It'll just take 3 or 4 months or something. Does that?
Exist? It exists, and in fact, that's one of the very few shipping options that still exists right now to Europe. Since at the time we're talking about this, there is the conflict in Ukraine. Almost all airmail shipping to Europe has been suspended.
Dang.
Right now, so
and if people look at a map. You'll very quickly work that out because you've got a big old country called Russia in between the EU and Japan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And here in southern Japan, like, I can see Vladivostok from my... Well, not... I mean... I can't, but like
you can see Russia from your house. That's what you want to say, Sarah Palin, isn't it?
Yes, I was gonna make a Sarah Palin joke right there, but I'm like, is he gonna get it? But yeah, I guess.
I've got it. Because I mean, I'm here in Estonia. It's that's a funny kind of thing. We live on really the opposite ends of the earth.
Oh yeah, completely.
But we both border Russia. Yeah. I'm 3 hours away from the border here right now. You're not that far away from the other end of that country.
Yeah, it's really crazy. It's really crazy. But it's small. Yeah, it's small world when you really think about it. And I also think it's funny how how I live in Japan and have for 17 years, and you live in Estonia, and we can still make a Sarah Palin joke when neither of us lives in America. That's That speaks. That speaks. But
we were doing one of the things that the thing that I do here on the ground in Estonia is I run a stand-up comedy production company.
Oh, really?
And it's a real long and kind of odd story. I'm Australian, but I've lived here for more than a decade, and everyone else I work with is Estonian. We run Estonian language shows, but don't speak very well Estonian. And we were doing every year. We like to take a show to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is the biggest arts festival in the world. And the first year we went, we wanted to. It's a Estonian show. They're doing it in English, obviously.
Sure.
And we didn't know how to say we're Estonian. We don't want to be too stereotyped. We want to say we're Estonia. And one of the options that we came down to in the end was we can see Russia from our house. And as the name of the show, and it was the last three, and we decided we couldn't put Russia in the title.
Goodness. Yeah.
We actually settled on straight out Estonia in the end, which was a bit. Again, we couldn't. I was like, a bit cringy, but it said the name, so we went for it anyway.
Yeah.
I wanted to start to get into your online store.
Sure.
So, Japan Retro Direct.
Yeah, it is the lamest title possible, but I wanted to be exactly direct. I had a store that predated it, and it was called Rising Stuff, like Land of the Rising Sun, Land of the Rising Stuff.
Yeah.
But it was terrible for like search results and things like that, because stuff is like one of the most common, and like people were finding things about self-rising flour, and like it was pretty bad. And then we let a friend of mine and I were making that, and we let the domain lapse for a while, and then I was gonna start it up again after my kids got a little older, and I tried to rebuy the domain name, and they wanted like thousands of dollars for it, and I'm like, no, it wasn't that good of a name to begin with. And so I thought I wanted to make it as direct as direct as possible. Japan Retro Direct, which again, very, very boring name, but like sometimes when the name is too cool, it's harder to find. But yeah,
I getcha. Well, my production company is called Comedy Estonia. You don't get more straight up and down than that, because.
But what's it about?
Yeah, exactly. when we started over 10 years ago, there was no stand-up comedy in Estonia. We sort of introduced that art form to this country, and it was a real cool privilege. At the time, we didn't understand the greater thing we were doing. We're just a bunch of dickheads standing on a coffee table telling jokes for the first time. And but it was like we understood that we needed a super literal name. So Comedy Estonia, and then the first sort of theatery type show we did was literally called we were like, well, what are we going to name it? And we're like, well, it's got to have stand-up comedy in the title. Okay, because it has to be that. Yeah. And we're like, but we also wanted to be personal. So stand-up comedy with Lewis and Eric was the name of the first show.
There you go.
Not very exciting, but hey, worked.
You got it.
Worked at the time. So when you, how many years ago was it that you did the Reborn, the Japan Retro Direct, this V2? When did you begin this?
I mean, it's hard to say, because for a while I was selling on this site called Game Gavel. Have you heard of it?
I remember the Game Gavel version at first, before you switched to your own engine.
Yeah, and if you have heard of it, you probably heard bad things, because it was owned by the people who went on to try to make the Coleco Chameleon.
Oh, good. Yeah, they've got a good reputation.
Yeah, really good. But it was great for me, because there was no fees whatsoever, because they were just they were trying to build up this site, so they invited a bunch of people from like YouTube communities or whatever to try to publicize it by listing stuff. So I never got involved in any of their, big projects, but like I listed my stuff there with no fees whatsoever, which was a lot better than eBay. And because I was like the only really big seller on the site, it almost became my site, and that was kind of a golden age, because that was at the tail end of when games were available super cheap, and it was also kind of an auction site too, and people were paying more than I imagined that they would for things. So it was, and then
you've dropped out there for me.
Sorry,
right now.
Thank you.
Good. No, you're back
for
again.
a second. Okay.
Oh, good.
That's
We're
fine.
good. You were saying at the tail end there was the auction site. You're actually getting some good prices.
Yeah, some people were actually for the most part, people were doing what I did was I put a fairly low auction price, and then a slightly higher buy it now price. And most people went with the buy it nows, but occasionally I'd list something interesting, and I'd wind up getting more than I would have imagined. So it was nice, but I'm very bitter about it because it shut down with no notification to me. I had thousands of listings on there at the time.
Drop out again. There.
Sorry, I lost you again.
It's all right. Just wait for you to come back.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Sorry, I lost you again.
No, all good.
Okay. So as I was saying,
it shut down quickly for some reason.
It shut down quickly. I'm still not exactly sure why, with no advance notice.
Oh. Okay.
So I had over 1,000 games listed, and at the time I was making descriptions for everything because what I always hated was when you go on eBay and you see a game you're not familiar with and you have no idea what it's about or if you can even play it. So my descriptions were always like, you could play this game without knowing Japanese, or this game is playable if you use a walkthrough. Here's the link to GameFAQs, and like stuff like that. So I lost all that information. I had to start from scratch because, and I contacted them and I said, "Can I just have my data? Because I'm gonna move it." And they said no, and so they're like, "We don't know where it is," and I'm like, nice business. Okay, right. Nice.
So is that what inspired you to move to your own platform? You're like,
That's
this ain't going to happen again. Okay.
So the new site is about 3 years old, something like that. It's not three and a half, something like that. It's something not
that ball region, sure.
It's not very old, but like at the time, I just to tell you the truth, I wasn't. We had a lot of stuff. So when I was the first iteration Rising stuff, we still had all these games, and frankly, I wanted to just put it up for a while to get rid of that stuff. But it was so fun that I just kept it going because I'd like to point out, like, this is not a job, not in any way. Sure. This is a hobby. Boutique is putting it too nicely, but like it's. I have a really good relationship with a lot of the customers that I have, and they send me lists of things, and I go out game hunting for them, and I get that thrill. They tell me, like, they'll give me a price. They're like, don't go higher than this, and I'm like, I can do it. I'm gonna find one. Nope, that one's too expensive. Go to a couple other places. That's it. That's the condition they wanted. That's the sweet spot. And there's definitely some endorphins happening right there, and like the store is, I was gonna say maybe self-sustaining, but again, since I'm a collector myself, I do not think there's any actual profit. But it allows me to buy pieces to keep for my collection, and I make a little bit extra that I can keep the site running, and because I have 4 children, and so and my job is not elite, so like there's not a lot. If I didn't do this store, like what is it they often say? It's a job that provides me beer money, but I would prefer to buy games.
Sure. Yeah. I actually wonder. I have some more questions about the store, but actually,
go for it.
Again, with your day job, I just had a question about Japanese culture.
Sure.
The term, maybe international people know, salaryman, right?
Sure.
Sure. I love that term.
Yeah.
Because to a Westerner like me, it almost sounds like it should be derogatory a little bit.
I mean, to a certain extent, it is.
How do you take that word?
Most Japanese people professionals fall into this salaryman thing because most of them are not executives. Most of them, you wear a suit every day. I don't know. Salaryman, like, depends on the job, really. If you like the job that you're doing, salaryman is okay. But if you don't, it's basically a euphemism for wage slave. It's like, it's very, the work culture here is insane. How many hours people work, how companies basically expect people to do overtime on a voluntary basis. Just the, I mean, there's a word in Japanese called karoshin, and it means to die by overwork. And one of my students was asking me, karoshin or karoshi, it depends on how it's used, but one of my friends was asking me how you would translate to English, and I said, we do not have a word for that in English.
Yes.
You don't normally see people drop dead from overwork in this country unless they're working an intensely dangerous job or they're a pro gamer. I guess
or
that,
in Detroit or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, exactly. There's a lot of words in Japanese that have no meaning in English. It's like there's one that Japanese people love to use all the time. It's shigata ga nai, or it's often shortened as shoganai, which means I could translate it to "it can't be helped" or "that's life." It's closer to like the French like "c'est la vie" or like the Spanish "que sera sera." And they're like, what do you say in English? And I'm like, we're so stubborn. We don't give up on any, like I'm an American. Like, no, we don't.
Just relax, chill out, man.
No, we don't let it go, Like we made the movie Frozen, but we have no idea how to let it go. So.
Okay, I just wanted to fix that cultural reference. And I guess, then the final one is, after I worked out, it's not a terrible thing to say.
Yeah.
Would you describe yourself as a salary man?
I mean, I definitely work those kind of hours, but I think as a foreigner in Japan, I never will be considered a salary man because I'm too unique here. And one of the almost definitions of being a salary man is to fit in and not be particularly unique. They all wear the same suits. And which is a disservice, because I know I have plenty of friends who are salarymen here who lead amazingly awesome lives outside of their work, but so it's not necessarily derogatory, but it's not exactly a compliment either.
Yeah, sure.
I would consider myself a creative, but working salaryman type hours.
Sure.
I wear suit and tie every day.
All right, that's nice. Okay, now we get the picture.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Back to your story a little bit.
Sure.
I from the outside, before I knew your sort of, I've been following you before that, but the observation that I made through Game Gavel, and then particularly when it came to your own site, was that you were really focusing on the affordable games. Like,
that's right.
You were the one selling, like, I can buy baseball on the Famicom, which is a couple of bucks or something like that. You're building that. What was your you've talked about your philosophy that you just wanted stuff for yourself, but the stuff you were selling was the lower end of the scale. What was your sort of philosophy starting with that? Because,
well, when I started, I had some of the more higher end stuff, but like, one of the things is those type of games have really gone up in price in Japan as well. They, it's very expensive. If you want to get something like, let me think of one of the, like PC Engine, like Rondo of Blood or something, Castlevania.
Okay.
Though that's going to run you $200 in Japan still too, and I could find a copy of that and I could sell it for eBay prices or whatever, and I could sell it for like 220 or something like that. But there's a tremendous risk in doing that. Like, when you buy the games, you often can't test them or anything like that, and I do a lot of shopping when I'm outside of my hometown. So, I get that and I find out that it's scratched or something like that, which, it's not very often in Japan. They keep their stuff in really good condition. But the thing is, when you go for a game that expensive, you're dealing with collectors and collectors with like a capital C or whatever, like the people who use terms like minty fresh and and like complete in box and things like that. I mean, I've had people who complained at the time when I was selling more expensive games. They're like, the registration card wasn't in there and you claimed it to be complete. And I'm like, okay, it had the stickers, it had the, the registration card. It's something people throw away, like,
yeah. Okay.
And So when you're dealing with a game like that, there's a tremendous amount of risk. And to tell you the truth, I always felt like a lot of the games that I was selling were just going into the hands of people who were reselling them.
Yeah, okay.
But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find the affordable little games that people can actually play. Maybe that were a bit overlooked. I'm a tremendous proponent of games that finding the good in games that were not necessarily considered all that good, and ideally I want to get games into the hands of people for like games that can be bought for under $10 that can be played without knowing a lot of Japanese, or can be played using a walkthrough or something like that, or even just the US version is so incredibly expensive that it's just, you're never going to own the actual one, but having a boxed Final Fantasy VI on your shelf looks so nice. The art is beautiful, just I'm hoping to do that, but I do sell higher priced items, but by request. If someone contacts me and they're like, I'm looking for this, and I can know exactly what condition they're looking for, and I can send some pictures while I'm out shopping and be like, is this one good enough? Then I'll do that. But for the most part, I'm just really happy to pick up these little things, and I don't know. There's a few games that I will buy just because they're favorites of mine that sell for a little more. Like I'll always pick up copies of Sin and Punishment when I see it, because I'm a big fan of that game, and a couple other ones. But yeah, curated is a good word.
I like that you like, because that keeps that personal thing. Because I think part of the reselling of games, I've not really resold much myself. I haven't overcome the FOMO that you've talked a lot about.
Oh, my goodness.
You start. A couple of times I've tried to go to the local market, and I've sold a few there. And I like to think, I'd like to think some guy rolls along in Tallinn, Estonia, and finds some Nintendo 64 games or something, and for a decent. And I'm doing something for this guy, but still, I look at the price and go like, oh, would I give it away for that much? Do I love it more than
I know
that I want to sell it for, and that sort of thing? And I like that you have kept it personal. Yeah. And I think, and I would say, it seems from the outside, that's how you've managed to avoid the issue that when you turn a hobby into a business, that can just turn things around and often spoil the fun for it. So it seems like you're really conscious of that line to keep it fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because again, it's not profitable for me. I mean, because I do it because, I mean, it's something I love doing. It allows me to have thousands of games in my house temporarily. I feel like a video store, Kids, a video store was a place that you could go and you could, like, they had these videos on magnetic tape. It was amazing. But like, I mean, the idea that I have like I have my permanent collection and I have a constantly flowing temporary collection. And my kids have, of course, followed that. And like my daughter's 12 years old right now, and she's starting to appreciate things right now. And like, I can just go into my gaming closet and they'll be like, hey, you should try this one out or whatever. She helps me test games sometimes. Because now this is another thing, and this is why the store is never going to grow to be too big, because I won't sell anything that I haven't played.
Okay.
And I won't sell anything that I haven't tested. So, this is why if you follow my Twitter, you'll see that like there's about 10 games go up a day, because that's as much as I can cope with, because and they're almost always like, today I put up Super Famicom and Famicom. Why those two systems?
In a batch, yeah.
Yeah, because those are the two systems I have hooked up to my TV right now. And I just test a bunch of them. And like, so it's, but unfortunately, like, that's led to a bunch, and if the game's scratched up or anything like that, it goes in a box that's in my attic right now, which is full of maybe 400 or 500 games that are in. So they work, like they play, but I know that like it's not what I would want to get if I got it. Do you know what I mean? and it's really hard to show how scratched it, and it's so
Sure,
I don't
you
know.
don't feel comfortable about it. It's got to ship over the other side of the world.
Exactly.
There's a chance this is going to become a problem, and if no one sends it back, they've still got some feeling.
Exactly.
Better just to make a nice feeling for everyone.
Or like the manual's too faded or something like that, but you can't really tell from the photo. So I don't know. What I'm going to do someday is I'm going to make I'm just going to be like, I'll send you 2 kilos of games for $10 or, just to get rid of it. But to someone who maybe can resurface the discs or something like that. I don't know. But right now it's just accumulating, and this is a problem because this is going to be my son's room soon. So I have to figure out where that's going to go.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Before, with the final thing with the store, I was wondering, have you noticed any interesting patterns from buyers as you see the buyers come and go and different things, and patterns from Western buyers that maybe you hadn't expected, or interesting things that had popped up from people? Tell us about that.
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so many things. French people love anime games.
Okay.
I don't know why, but they sell a ton of anime games, and then there's people who collect things that you wouldn't think people collected, like baseball games. For me, I like baseball games, but I'm fine with owning one from each generation. You know what I mean? But there are people who are trying to get a complete set of Famicom baseball games. There were a lot of baseball games on the Famicom, more than 40. It was a crazy amount. And there's people trying to collect that, and I'm thinking, are they trying to get a complete Famicom set? No, they're just collecting baseball, and I don't know. Or there's a lot of people who collect games from a manufacturer. One of my customers and friends collects games from an obscure Japanese development house called, I believe it was pronounced Hunex, Hunex or something, and they make shovelware basically, but they're fans of this, and if I see a game by that manufacturer, I send them a text. I'm like, oh, I found one. They're never expensive, but they're not common either. They're rare without being really pricey because they're not well known. So there's definitely people who are making their own collections of things. A lot of people want the Rockman games, which unfortunately have shot up in price a lot. But they want them as loose carts because they look so cool lined up. It's just the rainbow.
That thing about the people are trying to find their own subgenres to collect in, or make my own niche. I'm never going to have the whole Famicom collection.
That's right.
I'm never going to have that for many reasons. There's so many of them, and of course those are expensive. But if I can carve off some part, and maybe that is what's satisfying the FOMO. Okay, now I've got the collection, not the full, but I've got something, and an interesting niche. As you said, everything's been done under the sun with retro games now, so I'll find that. So, okay, it kind of, I guess if you pick through that ultimate FOMO, it does make sense to find that. I want to find, if I could just find, maybe I'm into baseball, so I'll take all the baseball. I mean, I imagine you have to at least be into baseball to collect all the baseball.
I would assume so, but I sometimes I'm not sure. But some people do share things with me, and a lot of it's connected with memory. A lot of it is always connected with memory. I mean, someone collects baseball, it's probably because they have really fond memories of playing it on the summer afternoon with their friends, because those were the games that everybody had. A lot of people want a Tecmo Bowl, which a lot of Americans, because that's an American football game that was just insanely popular at the time, and it's still being modded these days to add new players. People have ROM hacked to put in the current teams, because the way it plays is so comforting, because you pop in the John Madden football. Sorry, I'm talking about American football now. This is probably out of your wheelhouse, but
no, I'm good. I mean, I'm sure everyone kind of gets the broad reference, and I understand there's going to be a lot of your customers coming from America. So
and you play these new realistic sports games, and they're so there's something that's lost by complexity, I think. And I think that's why a lot of my customers are around my age. Sure. They played it when they were kids, and they're trying to recapture. And a lot of the customers have just found that the games that they wanted to play from their childhood are now prohibitively expensive to buy the original NES cards, and the Famicom cards are still reasonably priced. So
I found that. That's one thing for me that, I'm like you. I love the thrill of the chase. I love the feeling of entering the hard off, the anticipation. What will I find here? What's going to be in the cabinet? What's going to be in the junk bins? I know I've been to this one before, and I remember once they had a good junk section down the back, so it triggers something in the back of the brain. Oh, I know I'm going to get a bargain today. And for sure, I can... how to say? I feel like if I take a trip to Japan... I'd rather spend my money on a plane ticket than a high-priced console. That's where I'm putting my money in. The plane ticket, okay, I've got to pay accommodation, sure. But then when I get there, I'm still picking up that junk N64, which 99% of the time, that junk 64 is working. Those things are bomb-proof. And you know it's going to be fun.
Japan just does not know the meaning of the word junk. Listen, I've bought hundreds of games from the junk pile over the years, and I've got like one or two that didn't work. Like, because it's just what Japan calls junk is what American eBay calls near mint. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's like, you see games on eBay that are like missing the label, and it's like condition very good, and I'm like, in Japan this would be like. This is
not even, I don't know, considered like the back of the junk pile. And I think there's a lot of potential coming up there. Like I like in Hard Off. It seems more and more these days that they're offering testing stations. Last time I was there was more common to see a table with some plugs. Because what I was doing was bringing, especially if I'm testing like a DS, a handheld, I had the USB battery, and I would just stand there and plug them in. And I understood if I was just not too overt about it, it was okay. No one came to say, so I could at least plug it in and go, okay, it's charging on. It opens up. I can see it's charging. Good enough for me. I'll buy it for $10. Or something like that. But the area in junk where maybe one needs to be careful is CD-based games. Because that's so easy for the laser to not work or be off or something like that. But that's where I think there's a huge potential there right now because of all of the work that's done in modern retro games, the optical drive emulators. So we've got them now for PS. Even the one for Saturn is really cheap. It's only like $100. And Saturns without lasers, that's $3. That's 300 yen. That's 500 yen in a junk bin. Where before, it was hard. I wouldn't even know what to do with it. But now it's they're prime for inserting optical drive emulators in.
Completely.
And I think there's, I don't know, where people in the Western countries are paying so much for any sort of console. And it's like, oh God, a non-working PS1 is just $5 less than, and you can just have bins and bins worth.
I've had so many people. I don't really do hardware because, again, shipping has become insane lately. But I've had so many people to request to me like broken systems or whatever, which are actually kind of hard for me to find because most of this stuff works. People took good care of their stuff. But people are asking me for broken Saturns, broken Dreamcasts, because they're probably going to install one of those mods and they just want a nice looking case, and that's fine. Although there is a little bit of a sadness there, there's because it's like, that's one more Dreamcast that's not going to spin again, But I mean, it is preservation in a different way, and that's
I mean,
fine.
at least hopefully they're taking something that's broken, right? That I understand maybe I could get the Saturn back laser and work it and eventually fiddle with it, but if you're taking something that is broken and has been sitting in that junk pile and it probably isn't going anywhere, then that's a good part of that. I know it's getting late for you. I don't want to keep you up all night.
No problem.
I wanted to move on to, and moving on, we're talking about hard offs and getting into that. For the last 2 years, we've had the pandemic. We can't travel. Japan's still not open, at least to regular tourists. To regular tourists. Sorry.
It is just opening now to people with visas.
Right.
But for about 2 years, it was just closed. Like you couldn't get in unless you were Japanese, basically. And it was really it's something that Japan's going to be suffering from for a long time, because the foreign population went down a lot because people went back to their homes and they couldn't come back to Japan. No new foreign people were coming in, so the foreign population in Japan has gone down significantly.
So I'm very keen. I mean, they don't know when the tourist, it could be anywhere up to 6 months. Yeah. Who knows? I'm saving my pennies. I'm good to go.
I mean, assuming there's no new strain, it's gonna happen. It's trending that way. They first opened it up to like spouses and family members, and then they opened it up to people who already had approved work visas. Students are being able to come in now, and it's every day it's opening up a little bit more. Save up. I want to go to the United States. I'm American, so I can, but there's still mandatory quarantines and stuff like that, and I can't take that much vacation. So,
right, that's always tough, because my girlfriend and I just went for 3 weeks to Australia. Yeah, and while I had been able to enter as a citizen for some time, a couple of months or something, even before Christmas, she couldn't enter as a European citizen. And the way that we did it is that when they, in typical stupid Australia style, they kind of just announced it and then bam, it happened. So I think on about 2 weeks' notice. And I arranged it that we flew in on the day that it opened. We weren't going to wait around any longer. 12 hours after technically it kicked in, we were on the ground. And it was a great time to travel. No one's at the airport. So you're walking through immigration. And I'm not sure I'll be able to do it exactly as it would the same thing in Japan, but something not long after I would love, because my point of this story is that I've had 2 years of this FOMO, 2 years of going, there's hard off stores with things in them, and and I'm not there, and I can't look at them and not possibly get them for myself. And I was interested because through the pandemic, we've all been buying things online more and more. And certainly been a rise in the amount of Japanese sellers, and not just yourself, but moving up hardware. And I wonder, I mean, first of all, I wanted to talk about how, let's say even the last, maybe for my own personal needs, how have you seen the amount of stuff change in the last 2 years? And what's your thoughts, we'll get to that later on, the amount of stuff that's leaving Japan. That's interesting, because it's just heading out. So I guess let's start with on the ground, you're in stores. Sure. Look, I understand it's not the golden days. I don't want to compare it to your golden days of 2000, even 2006 when you were starting. But even in the last, let's say from the start of the pandemic, how do you judge what's happening different on the ground?
Prices have gone up a lot, just in general. I would say since the beginning of the pandemic, game prices for a lot of these used stores have gone up 50, 60, 70% for retro stuff. I think a lot of it is, people are not able to travel. People are not able to do much, so they're investing a little more in their hobbies. It's not just games. Many things have gone up in price. Any type of luxury good or anything like that, because and with the rise of the internet, of course, I'm part of the problem. I know that. I mean, I'm trying not to be greedy about it. I try to keep my prices very reasonable, always lower than eBay, and if I can't do it lower than eBay, I don't bother, because that's what I'm trying to do, because I wouldn't say I hate eBay. I still use it when I really need to find something, but I try to avoid it when I can, because.
But I wonder domestically, with the amount of, we're sitting around in our asses in the pandemic doing nothing. not nowhere. We can't go out. So
Yep.
you might even say some people had more disposable income
Oh,
sitting
yeah.
in their pockets.
Yep,
So even
yep.
domestically inside of Japan, once you're allowed out of your apartment, there's just collectors and people in not even exporters, not even
That's right.
resellers.
That's right.
Who had that extra to spend on that. So I wonder if that is also a factor pushing up that price
I mean,
as well.
game sales in general went up in Japan like crazy. You've got Animal Crossing is on track to become the best-selling video game ever made, console game, which is nuts. It's about the current best-selling video game ever is the original Japanese Pokemon Green, Red, and Yellow. Blue came.
Is that the Game Boy ones?
There's the Game Boy ones. It's the Game Boy ones. We had green in Japan. Not America was red and blue, and then later yellow, and Japan was green and red, and then a little later this enhanced blue, and then yellow. But I know this now because so many people ask me for Pokemon games, but I never played them when I was a kid.
No, neither did I. So I'm also
Yeah.
I kind of know a bit now to follow along with what you say, but I've never played.
I'm just a little bit too old for it. Like my brother's 3 years younger than me, and he played them. But at the time I was like, nah, that's baby's game. I'm playing Quake. Whatever I was playing back then. But it's so. I forgot where I was going with that.
The games we were talking about, Pokemon.
Yeah.
God, where were we going with that? We were talking about on the ground,
Yeah.
the games prices, how they've gone up because people have got the more disposable income in Japan.
Yep.
So there's that factor of that.
I got it. I picked it up. But anyway, those games were a phenomenon, which people thought with the advent of digital gaming and everything would never be matched again. And now Animal Crossing, it's going to go there in a couple of months. It's going to go past it. The new Mario Kart is on track to outsell all previous entries of Mario Kart combined. It's ridiculous. It's just so, and a lot of that is that they're good games, and a lot of it is that people are cooped up in their houses, and these games came out as a way of escape. And if you've ever played the new Animal Crossing, it is basically a life outside of your home simulator. It's like can't go fishing right now. We can go fishing in the game. Can't travel right now, but we can visit other people's islands in the game. It became kind of a, I don't know, cathartic type of experience for a lot of people. My kids got into it really big, but gaming went nuts, and I think a lot of people also were looking for comfort food in gaming. So like a lot of people my age, they wanted to buy a Famicom now because they remember a simpler time. A time where the news wasn't quite as scary, or at least we didn't realize it was that scary, where 2 buttons was enough,
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
And like, a lot of games these days take themselves so incredibly seriously too that like the escapism is sometimes lost. So I think a lot of people are going back into it. Like, one of my friends, he was doing modern gaming, but he just went and bought himself a Super Famicom and Dragon Quest 5 and 6, and played through them. And he said it was like a breath of fresh air. It's just. But that's the thing. For a long time, a lot of Japanese gamers would buy the new console and sell off their old collections. But I think, much like what happened in the U.S. and other places, people are like, I think, being stuck at home and wanting some kind of familiar experience. This is all speculation.
Sure, that's what we're here for. We're here to wildly speculate.
But from friends of mine that I've had, some of them have gotten into retro gaming based upon how old they are. My friends who are younger than me, they're collecting N64 right now. But I'm of the Famicom, Super Famicom age, so that's kind of where I focused myself.
Oh, like how far your age determines how far back you're gonna go.
That's right.
To get a retro item.
That's right, because I think there's definitely people like me who, and like probably what my kids will become, who will go retro from before they were born. But for a lot of the mainstream gamers, they're looking for that place where gaming was something they did that was comfortable, that was fun. Again, wild speculation, but
it makes sense.
But
for me personally, it's about I like controllers. I like, different controllers. So anything that's a different controller. I love fight sticks. I love arcade sticks.
Oh yeah.
For me, it's not so much about I had an NES because I had an Amiga for most of the time, and I had a Mega Drive, but I could only afford a few games. But for me, it was the experience of going to the arcade that I did. And I miss that experience of going down to our local milk bar in our small town. And there was Street Fighter. There was, but that was that almost like a stereotype to think of today. But there was that local arcade. They had the I could buy a milkshake. Oh my god, this sounds like it's in the 50s.
No, it's okay.
And then in the shop across the arcade, the walkway was empty, and so they just filled it with a few machines, and one of them was Street Fighter. And I remember fighting games and also shoot 'em ups being so bad at them. So not good at them. I don't understand Street Fighter. I didn't then. I'm not even saying I'm very good at it right now. So for me, the experience is not like, I had the Nintendo, I need it, but it's, I was so bad at them then, but even at the time, I was drawn to it. So I want to be good at it now. And I want that stick. I want to feel the stick. I want the buttons. I want that thing. And I want to be better at it and practice at it. So for me, I've got my nice little, I got my controller collection there behind me. I've just got myself my first steering wheel. I'm like, where have you been all my life? A steering wheel. This is tremendous. So I understand how that nostalgia can play out in different ways, whether it's a system or a generation or a style. And for me, it's a style. What would you say? Is it a system or a style for you personally? How does it come out? Or it's so different because you've been around it for so long.
It's hard to remember exactly, but my first memories are, of course, of the arcade too. For me, it was Shakey's Pizza, and they had a little arcade there, and they had pinball machines, and I remember playing, gosh, what did I play? I remember playing Burger Time. I remember playing Joust. I remember playing, and then later on, they got one of the Neo Geo multi-machines, so I played Samurai Showdown and things like that. And of course, Street Fighter was part of my high school growing up. Like the Street Fighter 2 at the bowling alley. That's where the cool kids went. And I like the things that I'm trying to explain to my kids that was a thing. Like I don't know what denomination of money you would have used when you were a kid, but in America it was a quarter, 25 cents or whatever. And if you had next game, you put your quarter down on that, and I was telling my daughter this, and she's like, isn't someone going to take your quarter? And I'm like, no, that would be sacrilege. This is the rules of this is, I remember
the first time I saw that as well, thinking to myself, just being a little dumb kid, not knowing, and an only child, a little bit sheltered. So I'm like, but they're going to just leave, and the line up a quarter. Like, how do you know which one was whose quarter, or 20 cents for us? How do you know whose was the 20 cents? And isn't someone going to, and I better watch the whole time to make sure I don't, and I'm going to put my 20 cents there. And eventually I got with it, but I remember being confused as well.
Yeah, but just that idea. So I don't know. I'm not sure if it's a genre or a time period or just a feeling, but like most of my good gaming memories are tied up with playing with friends or I didn't have a lot of money growing up, and so I didn't even play a lot of video games at the arcade. I would just go to the arcade and watch people who were very good at video games play them, like from a distance. I watched the Simpsons arcade game being beaten. I watched people finish games. I watched someone play through Dragon's Lair on 1 coin, which was
Wait, the Laserdisc.
the Laserdisc game.
Kind of,
Now,
yeah.
this is actually Dragon's Lair 2 Time Warp, which came out in '93, which seems quite late considering Dragon's Lair Space Ace were like early '80s, but it was made much earlier, but never released until. But anyway, but yeah, it just that sense of wonder, and just watching when a new machine got installed and going like, whoa, you see, and you're like, wow, I wonder if games will ever look that good in my own house. It's just, I still thought the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. Oh, for you, what is it? Is it Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, or is that only? Or is that
not
only
Ninja
England?
Turtles?
Oh, you guys.
Yeah, we heard about that.
All
Hero.
right.
We're like, what the
Yeah,
fuck?
yeah.
is this
Okay,
Hero?
good.
No,
You're
Ninja
allowed.
Turtles.
You're allowed to have ninjas.
We're allowed to
in
say
Austria-
ninja. Yeah.
Ninjas are allowed in Australia. That's what I learned today. But anyway, I remember playing that, and then they had the home version for the NES, which was great, but didn't look like the arcade machine. And I was thinking to myself, like, I wonder if video games are ever going to look this good at home. And now you look at it, it looks so archaic, but it's that feeling, it's that memory, but it's a really hard question to ask, because there's games right now, the 8-bit games that I'm discovering, that I'm playing for the first time like this year, which also give me that feeling. I don't know if it's just the
somehow imposed or superimposed feeling, or it reminds you of. I mean, maybe it's like I don't know. Again, wildly speculating on emotions here, but you're reliving that. Like, I can have that. It's new. It's not like, I'm playing my favorite Street Fighter and reliving the memory that way. This way I'm actually taking in something new. It could be something like that. Maybe that's a huge part of retro. Why people like your store, because you can help them find these things that they may not have known about before.
I think that's very possible. And like, also, I think I got into, I was a modern gamer up until I came to Japan. I never sold anything, so I guess I always was kind of but gaming is something that is allowing me, especially living in Japan as a foreigner, to find a connection with people my age.
Nice.
Because we have shared experience. I could go anywhere in Japan and go da 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 da, and someone's gonna do the last duh, like, because it is even across generations. Like, gaming is something that was a big part of the 80s and 90s in Japan, so much so that like almost anybody who lived during that time has some memory or some experience. You mentioned Dragon Quest to a random guy in the bar, and you're going to be talking for 2 hours about it. Like, it has been a way of me bridging the gap sometimes, because I would love to have said my success stories that I came to Japan, instantly became fluent in Japanese, and now I blah blah. No, I still struggle to get by with a lot of things. But if I can find something that I know a lot about, and something that I've studied what they might know about it, and we can have that shared experience. I was talking with someone who was my age the other day, and I don't know, he mentioned Famicom, and I reached into my backpack and I had a copy of Super Mario Brothers in there, because I use it as a prop sometimes. You know?
Okay, yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, I had that." And I'm like, "I had it as a kid too." And I'm like, "Oh, they had it in America just like that?" I'm like, "No." And I reached in and I pulled an NES cart out of, again, I'm a total nerd.
This is the Vinnk show, right?
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
Traveling Road Show.
Exactly. And I'm like, and he's like, "Oh, is it really different? It's so big compared to the, and I went, yeah, I could have made the obvious, things are bigger in America, but I didn't. But, but I went, no, it's the same. It's basically the same thing inside. And like, and he's like, what? And, the next week, again, this sounds incredibly nerdy, because it is, but I brought a game bit with me and I opened it up. and I showed that the pins are a little different, but it's the same thing inside, and it is exactly the same programming or whatever, because there's no Japanese in Super Mario Brothers in Japan. So like the experience he had when he was a kid and the experience I had was exactly the same. And there's
maybe that is a nice metaphor for the two cultures, that America seems bigger and badder at everything, but actually you use the you take it up, you look inside, and turns out we're all pretty equal at the end, even though
pins are a little different, but but I mean but it was a unifying moment, because there's very few things of shared culture that you can have, like maybe a McDonald's hamburger, because that was big in Japan as well, things like that. But for the most part, when you grow up, you're in one country or another, a lot of things are different. But I think to a certain extent, music, games, media, culture, a lot of that stuff is, if you can find something that's shared, it's a connection. It's something. And I don't know. I don't want to wax too philosophical on the whole thing, because for the most part,
it's interesting for me. Yeah. I guess when you were saying that story, I was comparing it to. So I am also a Westerner who lives in another country for well over a decade now. Yeah. And I was interested. So I'm when I'm in Japan, I like it because I feel like I'm really far away. I feel like that whatever that lost in translation, that isolation thing. I can get that peace and quiet for a while to just be on my own, and I don't understand anything, but I enjoy it, and I can just sort of take it in like that.
I get you.
And I can understand for you the difficulties that you would have had and to overcome to do your best to integrate. And then I was comparing that to my experiences here in Estonia, where certainly, look, they have their own language. Certainly, it's their own language everywhere. But they more readily speak English. If you walk up to a random person on the street, you'll probably you'll be able to communicate, right?
Oh, I'm
They'll
sure.
show you, And especially if they're any sort of under 30 age, you'll probably get a very coherent and very grammatically correct sentence out of them.
Oh, that sounds nice. That sounds so nice.
So while, yes, I can, and it's taken me 10 years to, even as I go on, to understand the things that I don't know, that yes, there are that levels. I don't speak Estonian very well. So there is a level that I haven't been able to deeply dig in, where on the other hand, you were forced to learn Japanese. So
you can't really survive without knowing some.
Right, you've had to go in. So it's just interesting that I've been able to skim by, hopefully a little bit as that stupid foreigner. I've tried not to. I've tried to do my bit by introducing a whole art form to the country. It's the only thing, and I hold on to that only because I realize I sound like that dumb foreigner who never properly learnt the language. I'm like, but I made an art form. I did that instead. Is that okay? And I know I'm like getting paranoid about it and a little bit defensive about it. So it's just interesting to compare that experience where you can get in the ground. And also, again, in a small country, so my observation again, Japanese people can live a Japanese life in their whole Japanese world. And everything that they need. Where Estonia is a country of just over 1 million people. Yeah. They've always had to have an outward-looking focus. 25 or whatever it was, a little bit more years ago, they said, no, Soviet Union, bad.
Yep.
We're not part of that anymore. They looked to the West. So they were more oriented for it. They were willing to take these ideas and they wanted to adapt and stuff like that. So I've been able to, I don't know, I haven't found it that hard to integrate, but okay, I guess it's, on the other hand though, for me, I wasn't really interested in the country below Latvia. I tried living in Finland, the country above, didn't quite connect for some weird reason, which I can't really tell you why. This small patch of land and these people are the ones I connected with, and it was interesting to hear your story. That, that's your place and your patch and the people that, I mean, I don't know what to say, you connected with, and then you had to keep working to make that connection. I don't mean like, instantly
no.
buddy, but you found that connection, that thing that was good for you there, and I love those stories about that. Anyway, I'm rambling about that.
I love talking about that stuff. I mean, one of the things about Japan is there's there's so many levels to everything that's going on. When I first came to Japan, I was a student, and then I came a couple of times as a tourist. And at that time, I thought Japan is is heaven on earth. It is the perfect country. They do everything better than we do. Like, I was just thinking, everyone's so polite. The customer is always right. And then I lived here for a while, and then it goes in waves. So for a while, I'm like, oh, it's so fake. You know what I mean? Like, they're so polite because they don't care. And then I'm like, but then there's another level beyond that, because there's the outward face, and then there's the inner heart. And like, once you actually get to know people, I found so many incredibly warm, incredibly wonderful people here. But you got to get through that facade, and that takes time, and it takes investment, because I get it. Japan is a country that's always like, oh, the West, that's a thing, that's cool. We like hamburgers, we will take your Disney movies. But for the most part, they spent 200 years in isolation where they didn't allow any foreign people in, and most Japanese people will never leave Japan, which is, even for travel, like, it's very interesting, because you'd think that Japanese people who have the means to, love to travel very much so, but a lot of them will never,
Right, the country is big enough, and there's enough infrastructure. And again, compared to a smaller country like Estonia, you just can't not. I mean, no doubt there are people who never leave Estonia, but you're much more likely to at least have a European worldview, or at least understanding of it, where I could totally understand that you could live your whole life in Japan and just have that focus.
Oh, easily. Especially if you don't speak any language other than Japanese, which is something, of course, people are trying to help out right now. There's a much increased English education, so it's going to be years before the full effects really reach.
Nope, we've had a little dropout again,
because a lot of people learn. Oh, no problem.
There we go. We're back again.
Sorry, a lot of people learn English in this country, but from textbooks, and they learn about grammar and they learn vocabulary, but they don't actually know how to have a conversation, which makes traveling very scary. And so a lot of Japanese people, when they do travel, you've got that stereotype of a herd of Japanese tourists with all their cameras, whatever. Yeah, sure. And like, there is some truth to that, because a lot of Japanese people will travel with tour groups. The tour guides speak English so that the tourists don't have to. That's changing. Like, that's a stereotype that's changing a lot, but you still see it. I remember I went to visit the Grand Canyon about 12 years ago, and there was a tour bus, and a bunch of Japanese tourists came out, and they came out, and they went to the edge of the Grand Canyon. They all took their photos, and I spoke a little Japanese by that point, because I'd been living there. And I asked them, I'm like, oh, what are you doing today? And they're like, oh, we're going to see the Hoover Dam, we're going to the Grand Canyon, and we're going to Las Vegas. And I'm like, wow, this is like your week's plan. I'm like, no, just today. It's like, like, they went to the Grand Canyon, they took their photos. 30-40 minutes later, they were all back on the bus. Grand Canyon done. And I couldn't get over that, but like, as I live in Japan more, I realize how hard it is to take long vacations. So a lot of tourists try to pack it all in, and there's just this. So I think it's isolated in that way. They're very interested in other countries, but it's hard to get out there. So I've lived in Japan 17 years, and a lot of people back home, they ask me, are you going to become a Japanese citizen? And I think probably not. Because there's no real advantage to it, because there's no way anybody's ever going to think I'm Japanese.
Sure.
Like, I will never be treated as a Japanese, for better or for worse. Japan has what I would call positive racism. Oh, that's a dangerous term.
It's all right. It happens.
I'll think of something better for it. But racism.
What I'm interested actually,
Yeah.
when you termed the phrase, okay, I get it as well,
Sure.
becoming the citizen of that country
Sure.
you lived in. And it's the first time actually when you say that you
Yeah.
frame that in terms of, well, if I become a citizen, am I culturally doing that? Because
Exactly.
I've always thought, well, I don't need to become an Estonian citizen because if I get a permanent residency or when my girlfriend and I get married,
Sure.
then I have enough legal rights to stay here.
Yeah,
I've always framed it in terms of legal rights. And
Yeah.
it was just interesting that you frame that in terms of cultural integration
Oh, yeah.
instead. I mean, I know you obviously think of the legal part, but it was your first
of course.
go-to was that I'll
yeah.
never be Japanese. Where I've
No.
never really thought about it like, oh, I'll never be Estonian, so should I be a citizen?
I mean, my kids. I married a Japanese woman, so my kids are half Japanese and half American, and I think they look. I mean, they don't look intensely American. They've got dark hair and things like that, but they will never exactly be considered Japanese, despite the fact that they've lived their entire lives in Japan, just because there's just not a tremendous multicultural understanding here. And the thing is, a lot of people that's a deal breaker when they're in Japan. And I've seen a lot of people who came here to live and they stayed for a few months and they're like, I can't. But
So
I don't know.
What's the deal breaker about that? That they won't be accepted or they don't feel like they'll fit in? What's that deal breaker for them?
I mean, it's the idea that there will always be those type of stereotypes. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I've been here 17 years. And if I go to a convenience store and I order my bento, okay, my lunchbox, whatever, half of the time, the person working at the convenience store will be like, oh, I'm sorry, we have only chopsticks. I will find you a fork. I'm like, it's okay. I can do the thing that the 3-year-olds in this country can do. Don't worry. I'm okay. And there was a point when I'd been living here when I first got here, I'm like, oh, that's nice. They're trying to look out for me. And then there was a point where I was like, girl, why can't they? It's like, but I've come to the point right now where it's like, I've come to terms with it and I'm okay with it. But there's always going to be perceptions because there's not many Western people who live in this country, and the ones who do are in very specific roles. Teachers and entertainers and things like that. And so, but the thing is, what I told you about all the different faces of Japan, but like I live in a small town and I've made a place for myself. So now if I go to the neighborhood convenience store, they all know me.
Right.
And they know, and so I'm not the foreigner anymore. I'm their foreigner. if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
That's
so. I like that, and I like that. Okay, you've managed to carve out your niche. I would say, okay, again to compare to my circumstance.
Sure.
I mean, okay, I live in the capital, but Estonia is such a small country that everywhere seems small, right?
Yeah.
And we're a small country where I was trying to say, like, I saw a parliamentarian, like a minister at the supermarket. And that's so normal, right? No security or nothing.
Yeah.
He's got his basket buying milk, right?
Yeah.
Super normal to just see. No one is super special. No one is like, oh, the star or the most important VIP that you'll never see. Not like that. My experience... so not only is it a smaller place as well, but my experience is through comedy. I wouldn't say that I'm famous, but through the work that I've done, people will recognize me, or at least vaguely enough to be like, "Oh, you're the foreign comedy guy."
There you go.
I know, I've seen the video that you did, or something, right? And even though it was a while ago, Estonians remember that, so it's enough. So my level of integration. And while I think I haven't experienced straight up racism in Estonia, and look, it happens. All countries have that element in them. They can have that prejudice. But I've never had someone be like, at me. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is because I'm vaguely recognizable. They're like, you're the thing. So, But coming back to your example, in your local community, in your area, you're recognizable.
That's right.
To them. We've seen you around. Oh, we know your face. Maybe I've seen you walking down the street a few times. So I have that same.
I've been on TV a number of times too.
Right.
Whenever they need what's the foreigner's opinion? Oh, we know one here. Let's, yeah.
So I think that my time, in that way, I've been able to integrate in this country a little bit easier as well, because they'll go like, oh, okay, yeah, that guy. And not only maybe will give you help, they're pretty helpful. I don't want to say that they're not helpful people, but just as you commented on the levels of Japanese people, they can be a little bit introverted, a bit shy to get that out. Certainly, that stereotype extends to Northern Europeans.
Oh, definitely,
Eastern Europeans. You know, I'm very northern, I'm cold, Nordic, that sort of thing. Yeah. Where that level of like, oh, I recognize your face from somewhere was enough to just get past the crack in the ice. At least a bit, just cracking the ice, and they're like, "Hey, you know," and at least, and again, common things that you're talking about. You said that you've been able to connect over Famicom games,
That's
and
right.
you played this game or the Mario or something.
That's right.
For me, well, because people associate me with the comedy, I can always talk about our comedy shows.
Sure.
They've probably been to one of our shows and be like, you've been to the show? Oh, well, that show, you know, how was that? So there's always, they can recognize my face enough to be like, oh, okay. And then always like, oh, and there's a topic, comedy. Yeah. And the comedy shows, because the work, my friends are far more famous and popular than I am. And the shows that they do, they're really well known. So there's always that topic to talk about. So
sure,
it's interesting how very different circumstances, but we found that way to find that relationship point to those around us.
You got to open that door. As I said, it sounds intensely geeky, but I do carry a Famicom game in my backpack. Sometimes even in my suit pocket, so it's sticking out a little bit, so I can find my people. You know what I mean? Like instead of a handkerchief or whatever, I'll have a copy of Mario because people who don't know what it is don't even see it. They don't even notice. But people who do know what it is, they're like, oh, you know, it's that kind of, and it's, you just, people want to talk to other people. People want to find things to do with other people, but people often don't know how to get there. And why I'm saying people rather than Japanese is because I think that's a universal truth. Is people are looking for a way to connect, but they often don't know how to even start, you know. I had no idea the podcast would go this direction. I have to say, I wasn't.
It's good. I have to go soon, unfortunately.
No, that's fine. It's almost.
I'm enjoying. I need to go here.
I got work in the morning.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Got to put on my salaryman costume in about 5 hours.
Yeah, I got to admit, I made my little notes, and they were all about video games and how's that game selling and all of this. And of course, I missed the really fucking obvious one, which is we're both foreigners living in a foreign land, and also having done that for some time as well. So that extended experience, not just
exactly. Not just a touristy type of
Right. And well, look at it could always be for me. I'm like, well, I've been here 12 years. You know, I've seen. There's that. Is there a little bit of that with the foreigners in Japan? Like, well, I've been this many years and that many years, and it's a little bit of like cred.
I'm not sure too much because I only know one foreigner here who's been here longer than me.
Okay.
But at the time, like, Japan is a very a country that the foreigners do not usually stay for extended periods of time. They usually do a year. A lot of what is it called? Not gap year. Where you work for a year somewhere.
It's gap time off, working holiday. We call
working
it
holiday. There we go. Working holiday. That's what I was looking for. We got a lot of people on working holidays who are like, they just finished college. They're going to do a year in Japan, and then they're going to go back and start their real life. But some of us just lingered. And most of the people who've been here for a long time are people who have settled down. They've gotten married to one of the local people, and they've started families and things like that. So I don't know. It's such a small community that there's maybe not as, at least not in my town, much competitiveness.
Right,
Yeah.
you're living in a small place, not living in
Yep.
Tokyo.
If I lived in
Right,
Tokyo,
so, okay.
I'm sure there would be. We used to cover Tokyo Game Show I used to write for a site called Four Color Rebellion. It's still around, but it's not what it was really active before the big sites came and kind of but anyway, I used to cover and there were game journalists who've been living in Japan for years and years and years, and there was definitely that, like, but around my local area, not so much. Well, anyway, I'll let you go, but I'll tell you what. Why don't you come on my podcast sometime? We'll continue this talk.
Love to do that.
Yeah,
love to talk about that here. So anyway, what I'll do is I'll hit stop and then we'll stay on the line for a second. So when we hit stop, it won't cut you off for a moment.
No problem.
Anyway, thank you very much for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed the different areas and directions that our conversation has taken. Vinnk, thank you very much for coming on today, mate.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me. I did not know exactly what to expect. It was not this, but I'm glad it happened.
Nice one. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.